Hey guys, welcome back to Stream File. We're your hosts Ben and John. On this episode, we're gonna be talking about The Bear on Hulu. Gonna try not to give you the spoilers, but we'll talk about it in the after the intro.
Welcome to Streamophile, the show where John and Ben watch the latest on all streaming platforms and let you know whether to stream it or skip it. We stream everything, so you don't have to.
All right, guys. So on this episode, like I said in the intro, we're talking about The Bear on Hulu. 10 episodes. John always. I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna steal this from you, even though you trademarked it. It's a bite-size, uh, digestive binge, right? That's the best way to describe it. But before we get into the whole particulars of it, John, tell us about the show and who's in the cast.
God, you royally screwed that up. They are bite-sized episodes. That's what you wanted to say. You couldn't even steal my catchphrase. That's all right. So the Bear
Oh,
on Hulu. I'm gonna tell you what it's about. You just sit there and listen. Don't try to cut me off. It's about a young chef from the world of fine dining who comes home to Chicago to run his family's Italian beef sandwich shop after the suicide of his older brother, who left behind debts, a rundown kitchen, and an unruly staff. And let me give you the cast of the show. So, obviously, in the lead, playing Carmen, also known as Carmi, is Jeremy Allen White. You may have heard of him from Shameless fame on Showtime. Playing his cousin, who's not really his cousin, he was just his brother's best friend, is Ebon or Eben Moss. I can't even pronounce that last name. I'm not even gonna attempt it. Bachrach. Playing Sydney, who's a new chef who comes to work at the shop, is man. I can't pronounce any of these names. Ayo Edibiri. God, and this is usually Ben who can't pronounce any names, but
yeah.
Ayo
That's why I kick it
Edibiri.
to you for this. Yeah.
Yeah, playing Sugar, who is Carmi's sister, Abby Elliott. Playing Neil, also known as Fack, who's like the handyman who does everything but doesn't really work at the sandwich shop, is Maddie Matheson. Playing Marcus, who is I guess the pastry chef you could call him, is Lionel Boyce, and or Boise. Playing the individual at the what is it? Al Anon. Al Anon is like an organization for people who have been affected by individuals who suffer from alcoholism or who are, addicted to alcohol. Playing, I guess, the group lead is Molly Ringwald, and then playing
Yeah.
Tina, who is, we'll call her the feisty veteran
Mm.
cook in the shop, is Lisa Colon Sayas, and playing Pete, Pete is
Oh, Pete.
Chris Wataski, and we got a big
Some
one
hard
who
names.
makes yeah, and a big one, playing Cicero, Jimmy Cicero, who is Carmi's uncle, is Oliver Platt. Big names,
Big
and
time actor.
yeah, big time
Yep.
actor, and playing Ibra or Ibrahim is Edwin Lee Gibson. I think that is the entire cast. Yeah, I got everybody, but yeah, big time actors.
All right. So where do you want to start with this? Do you want to go? Because look, this is a show that came out June 23rd. So roughly 4 months ago, 3 months ago. Sorry, my math is terrible when there's bourbon involved. So it came out about 3 months ago on Hulu,
Mhm.
and I heard about it from the Lebatard podcast. Right? They talk about it, and then whenever they were talking, I was like, "Oh, this seems like an interesting show," but I'm going to go ahead and skip the next couple episodes of their podcast because I don't want them to spoil the show because they could just talk about it and they could
Right.
spoil it in a mid conversation. So I had to stay away from that. I was like, this sounds interesting. Finally got around to it with everything else that's out there, and man, I was, I didn't know what to expect. Right, like it was a show that I was like, all right, I know you, like you said in the synopsis, he's a chef, but I was like, okay, what does that mean? Like I've seen chef shows before where I've seen like Chef's Table. I saw Chef with I can't remember, I can't think of his name. It was Sofia Vergara was in the movie, and the guy who directed all the Marvels and all that stuff. That so like I'm fascinated, and I saw Burnt with
John
Bradley Cooper,
Favreau. Yeah.
so I like that. John Favreau, thank you. Um, and I'm interested in that genre, right? Like just seeing that inside of that world because I've never worked in it or have any experience in it. But dude, it was like immediately so intense, right? Like from literally from the
Yeah.
opening scene, it just jumps right at you. Like we're gonna like if you haven't listened to our podcast before, if it's a show that is fresh out, we're not gonna spoil it for you. We'll give you our overarching thoughts and opinions on the show, but we'll never give you details or we'll never spoil anything for you. Movies that are older or shows that are older, we'll talk about it more openly because if it's five years or more, probably should have seen it by now. Spoiler alerts on those. But yeah, what was your initial thoughts on the show, man?
Yeah. Well, I mean, by the way, just to kind of piggyback, or one of my other favorite army terms, to caveat off of what you just said, uh,
Mm-hmm.
even though we're not going to spoil, like we might speak, we're going to speak vaguely about most of the show
Yep.
because we don't want to spoil anything, but we might mention something that happened that's not necessarily a spoiler because we got to give you some context. Um, so yeah,
Yes.
having said that, the show was intense. Carmi,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the other chefs, Tina, the chef that Carmi worked for in New York, who is not on the cast, but that is his name escapes me.
Joel.
Yes,
He used to do Talk
who
Soup.
who also hosts a cooking show,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, on like E right now.
Yes.
I'll find his name,
Mm-hmm.
but they are maniacs. Like I've never worked in that world, and on a kitchen line, on a line, whether in any capacity, a
Or in a
chef,
restaurant.
a cook,
Yep.
whatever. I mean, if that's what it's like, how do you go home and then come back the next day and want to do it again? Because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, that was so intense. I think I sent you a message after the first episode. I said if I was working with someone like that, and I think I was referring to Richie,
Sydney.
right, his cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah, who I
Yeah. Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
man, if I was working with someone like that, I would have stabbed him and then walked off and gone to find another job. Like there's no way I could take
Yeah.
2 minutes of that environment. I'm sure you would.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to, but holy cow! Aside from that, and that's throughout every episode, you see the intensity. This show is huge on those relationships, right? The relationships that they have with each other. Um,
Yep.
you find out that you find out they call each other cousin, cuz this, and that. And then, as I read in the synopsis, right, Carmi's older brother, Michael, committed suicide, and as the show goes on, you kind of get a little bit of a backstory from him because you have no idea who Michael is. And as the show progresses,
Right.
they give you little bits and pieces, flashbacks of what they were doing, how they hung out, the type of person that he was. Um, who he was also an intense dude. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so as Carmi goes to these meetings, like these Al-Anon meetings, I didn't even know what Al-Anon was. You kind of start to figure out,
Me
oh,
neither.
maybe his brother was addicted, or that's what led to him. And obviously, they talk about those. It's not a secret. It's not a big reveal. That's you realize that's what probably led to his suicide, his addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But this is all based on relationships, and all those relationships are extremely, everything is intense, right? And so this is, he goes back to Chicago. It's that whole Chicago attitude. So that there is no filter, right? The way people speak to each other.
Yep.
And you can tell because Tina is that take no nonsense, give it to you straight. Sometimes is being a ass just because she could be, and that's it. She's gonna give you a hard time for no reason. She's gonna go out of her way to give you a hard time for no reason. Um, but they all do that, and then you start to realize, at first I'm like, you know what, I can't work in that environment, and then you start to realize, this is who they are. This is how they. This is the relationship you and I have. We like they're just busting balls, right?
Yes.
To like the nth degree, to like a different level.
Yeah.
Like what
Yeah.
is it? Dragon Ball Z is over 9,000. I
Yeah. Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
it.
So, like, it's hard for us. Like, it's always gonna be hard for us, especially for shows like this, to like wait till like our big reveal of like Stream and Skip It or Wild Wild West It. This like
Right.
I I love this show. Like I the intensity that it has, the the small like continuity that it has, like the Tina character, right? Like it's hard to the Tina character slowly growing into understanding Sydney, right? With like with there never have what I loved about it was like there never was like a conversation like, oh Sydney, you know what, you are a great person. Like those moments that like shows do where like they lay it out
Hmm.
too obvious
Yeah.
is just like something as small as like the switch of the articles of clothing, right? You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like it was from like, oh, she was wearing this and now she's wearing this. Oh, so she's wearing this now, so that means that she did it. You know what I mean? Like those small things that Sydney does for Tina. The you hate cousin, right? You hate him for so long, and then he has that conversation in the car, and you're like, oh
Hmm.
man, like they're dealing with more than just this. Like I like
Right.
when a character, especially like those little scenes. That scene took a minute and a half, maybe, when he's talking. You know what I mean? When he's talking to his ex, like that scene, and Sydney, like it's these little growths of the
Yeah.
character that don't take much time, more of an understanding into who they are, right? Like
Right.
they're all dealing with this loss of somebody who they idolized and looked up to because it was all their boss, their friends.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's the loss of somebody to suicide, to addiction, to not knowing that he was addicted because they just thought he was the life of the party. Like again, with that, we're not giving anything away. That's all in the synopsis, right? Like that's all in
Right.
that John read out. Like it's just such a well written show. But bro, look, we're gonna jump around. Don't know what episode we're talking about. Like
Hmm.
that like 12-minute monologue that Carmi
Yeah.
gives in one of the
Hmm.
bro, bro, like I watched it again like right after he did it. I like, yeah, I'm sorry, like I'm gonna have to just watch it again because I was
Yeah.
like I the emotion that he put out in his acting, like you felt like he, oh bro, oh.
My wife
Like I'm trying to
had
give
had
synopsis.
not watched the
I don't want
show.
to give it away.
No, my wife
Yeah,
had not watched the show, and she jumped in on that episode, and she's asking me. She's like, "So what is this? Is this a documentary or?" Because I guess she thought that he was being interviewed, or that
hmm,
someone had asked him a question and he was telling his life story, because that's how realistic, that's how much it jumped off the screen. She didn't know it was just
yes,
a TV show. She thought it was a documentary and someone was telling their story. And of course, I would like pause it and rewind it 10 seconds, pause it because I don't like talking during a show. So I would pause it, rewind,
yes,
and
yeah.
then she would just look at me. I was like, she's like, "Am I interrupting something else?" "No, baby." Rewind and then play. I'm explaining it to you. I'm good. I'm not
Yeah,
complaining. But
yeah,
I wanted to
yeah,
catch that whole thing because it just jumps out of the screen at you, and
yeah.
that was incredible. I don't know how long was it. I mean, maybe it wasn't 12 minutes, but good God, was that just the
I think I
yeah.
timed. So I think I timed it. I think it was like 10 minutes and 27 seconds, something like that. Like of just him, and like when he was doing it, like I'm reliving it right now because I saw the show
Mhm.
probably a week ago or 2 weeks ago, right? But I still remember it. When he's doing that,
Yeah.
I felt like I was in the room with him because he's at an Al-Anon meeting. I felt like I was in the room with him. I was like, man, because like he's telling you so much, but he's not telling you a lot because he's still guarded within himself. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's just like the layers of that was crazy, and like the way that, like you said, the way they communicate with each other is how you and I communicate with each other. Obviously, off
Hmm.
screen because we keep this podcast within a certain rating. You know what I mean? Like disrespectful things we say to each other, you keep that in our text messages. But
Yeah,
it's
we keep it off
like,
the podcast.
yeah, like we couldn't. Like, there's not many people that you would have that relationship with. Like, I don't know anybody that I work with that I would have that kind of relationship with. You know what I mean? And it's like with Sydney when she comes in, it's like it's right off the bat they're giving her shit, right? And then she's trying to
Hmm.
like she's overwhelming in her own right because you're like, what? Why is she like this? And then they give you the story behind that, why she needs to
Hmm.
feel like, you know what I mean? She has these voids to fill. Like they explain every character, but like they don't overwhelm the explaining. You know what I mean? Like they just
Right.
give
Yeah, they
you
fill in
as to
those
why.
some
Like,
gaps.
yeah, and I appreciate that, like it, because I always say like when I watch shitty shows or bad movies, it's like it takes 2 seconds to
Mhm.
explain why this is happening, right? Like it
Yeah.
just it takes a little bit off screen, like little flashback or whatever, and just
Mm-hmm.
gives me a little bit more insight into who this character is. And they don't
Right.
waste that with this. Like they explain, maybe the only one that they kind of wasted with is with Sugar, right? Like they don't. I don't think they give her the like she only has the interactions with Carmi. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
in those moments, and maybe that's explanation enough. It would have been nice to see, other than that one scene of them together with the
Yeah.
older brother, like
Yeah.
what she's struggling with. You know what I mean? Like is she how she's dealing with that loss? Because they don't. Besides those conversations with Carmi, there really isn't any more of an explanation to her. So she's the only kind of character that you don't get real backstory like with the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it has this. That's me nitpicking,
Yeah.
honestly. So
But maybe I mean, obviously, you would think they would give it more time because she was, she was a sibling, and other
yeah.
people like Sydney and other people in the show get more time as far as giving a little bit of an insight to that character, a bit of a backstory, even if it's a flashback for a few seconds. But
Hmm.
she's also more. She's also she's not as connected to the shop. She was connected to her brother,
Yep.
obviously, but Carmi was
Hmm.
connected
Hmm.
to his brother, to the shop, the issues that he had with him, and obviously Richie, his cousin, who's not his cousin, but like you and I, we're like brothers, but we're not blood, we're not
Yep.
related. That's the type
Yeah.
of relationship they
Yep.
have. It's this love, hate, 0 to 60 type of relationship. And it doesn't seem like Sugar is in that mode. I mean, she's married to Pete, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's true.
that's all we need to
That
say
was
about
such a
Pete.
such a
You'll
great
know
character.
when you get there.
That's all
He
we need to say
was. He
about Pete.
played it
Yeah.
so well.
Oh man, that scene in the van was so funny when he was like, ugh,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're right though. Like as as you were saying it, like it did make sense because she doesn't work in the shop and she has
It's a little bit
animosity towards
removed.
it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a little bit removed, which makes sense because she has like that shop, the way she feels about it, like that shop took her. You know what I mean? Like that's where she lost her
Hmm.
brother to before she lost her brother. Like that's where he always was, right? Like he was there probably at
Right.
4 a.m. because they're there super early to really late. Like where's his work life balance? Where's his work family balance? So
Hmm.
it's just such a good show, man. Like, dude, like I hate cousin, but then I want I'm kind of rooting for this guy. Like I'm kind of with you here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was crazy. It was crazy. Who's your favorite? I'll say this. Who's your favorite? I'll say this. Who's your favorite character?
Man, look, this is not my favorite character, but I'll tell you, Cicero, Uncle Jimmy. When he
Oh yeah,
comes around to say hi to Carmi. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't know at that time if I should take him seriously or not. As far as what he tells him, hey, I came to
yeah,
say hi, and obviously his brother left that to stuff. Uh, but I was like,
yep,
is he really his uncle? Is that the same relationship that he has with Richie, that he calls him cuz, but they're not really
hmm,
cousins? And
yep,
what's going on here? But he played it
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
like yeah, it wasn't overacted, and they obviously later on you see a little bit of that relationship too. The conversations that they have, and it's nice
in the house.
to again, yeah,
Hmm.
in the house and at the party, and it's nice to see the a little bit of the backstory, right? His father
Yep,
explains a lot, then it explains the relation, then understand the real relationship that they have with Cicero, that Cam has with him. Um, but my
yep,
favorite
yep, yep.
character is is Fack. I love Fack. Fack
Facts the old black dude.
is no man. Fack is the dude that doesn't work there, who comes in and fixes everything. The handyman.
Oh, it's not Matty Matheson. Matty Matheson.
Matty Matheson,
Yo,
who's an actual chef. Matty Matheson, who's a
yes,
real chef.
yes. He's an actual chef, and he's one of the producers on the show, which is what gives it the
Yeah.
reality, like that realness feeling
Of
on the show. Bro,
mm-hmm.
he is so fun.
Right.
Him and he's Richie's actual brother. because it's like that. Like that's why he always comes around. Like that's kind of what they don't say it, but like that's kind of what they insinuated when he was like,
Yeah.
"Say it." Like after he like choked him out, he's like, "No, I'm not gonna say it. Say it." And then they go
Oh,
into that whole back and forth, bro. Like,
but you know what
yeah,
he's trying to
yeah,
make him
like that's
say? That word in Italian, what it
is
means?
that something?
Oh,
Let's not stop.
yeah,
We're not
you'll.
saying it on this show.
No, no, no,
Let Hulu
no. I'm
handle
not.
that.
Yeah,
Let's
Hulu
not say
can't.
that. Yeah, but my favorite character is dude with the cakes.
Marcus. I was gonna say Marcus. He was like next
What's
up
his
there.
name? Yeah,
Marcus. Yeah.
bro. I liked again. It goes back to what I was saying like earlier, right? Like just the subtleness of the growth of the characters, right?
Right.
Where it's not this like obvious, where it's not this obvious thing where like scene he's this and the next scene he's, you know what I mean? Like the
Mhm.
world's greatest. It's like subtleness, like the devotion, the dedication that he has, like him, like I don't want, you know what I mean? Like you
No,
know,
it's
like
it's
him
it's
doing
that slow
him
burn.
not going, him not going, yeah, him not going home because he's so obsessed with this, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this one delicacy that he saw in a window as a kid. Like that's so crazy and it's so well done, man. Like it is again, it's bite size, it's perfect. It's one of for me, and I'm trying not to overreact because it's been a couple of weeks and I watched a bunch of stuff after that.
Hmm.
It's one of the best shows I've seen in a while. Just and to not see what's gonna happen, and then how it culminates in the end with the it just it's I'm trying not to curse, right? It's perfectly shitty. Like it's shitted, you know what I mean? Like it's so intense and it's you can't breathe. And that scene where like they try to like introduce technology into the kitchen
Right. Yeah.
and it all goes to shit. You know what I mean? Like, and the show is so intense where like you can't breathe. Like I'm like, yo, I'm not even in the kitchen. I can't breathe. Like it was so well done, and then it ends the way it ends. I was like, oh, that's perfect. Because I don't like shows that like give you that white knight, that perfect. Let's wrap this up in a bow.
Ties us in a
Because it's
yeah.
not that.
Gives it into a perfect bow.
Yeah, yeah, it's not that show. Like that's not like I want reality. That's not how life is. Like nothing about this shit
Yeah.
is perfect. None of it. Like everything has a little like mixtures of gray and black and this, like, and that is it's just such a well done show, man. Like to get into the acting, like just I'm going to tell you like one scene, but like the the relationships and the banter between the characters, you're like, yo, I would never let anybody talk to me like this. People will get stabbed. You know what I mean? Like people will get stabbed. Like
Absolutely.
you're not screaming at me at the top of your lungs ever in the history of life, and I got to deal with that for 16 hours a day. You must be
Hmm.
crazy. And they all are like a little bit crazy.
Out of their minds. Yeah, they are.
Just
They are
absolutely.
all insane. But even Fack, right? I say
Just
I say Fack and Marcus were my favorite characters because Fack was that guy that came in and he was just like he's trying to get a job. He's like he's trying. He's like, hey, I don't work here, but I'm working here all the time. I'm a handyman. I fix everything, but he's not officially on the payroll. Hell, I mean, I don't think he gets paid. Period. He just comes and fixes stuff and hangs out with them.
yeah, yep.
But he goes from that guy who gets they all like Marcus, right? You see him progress his love for this art, and he experiments little by little.
Hmm.
You see his growth, and he's trying new things. And Fack is the same way. Like you see him like that scene where cousin where Richie's telling him, "Hey, say it."
Hmm.
He had had enough. He had had enough of being the guy that they picked
The
on, being
pushover.
just
Yep.
taking it, the pushover, and he's like, you
Hmm.
know what, I'm done. But that took time. You saw it. It grew over time over the show. Man, I just there and it's hard to say that I have one favorite character of another because obviously Carmi is intense. He's
So
the focal point.
that's
He's incredible. Cousin Richard, who is intense in a different way, in the ball busting.
mm-hmm.
You know, they I don't know, man. They cast these guys so well. Sydney. The way that she plays her character. Again, I'm gonna screw up her name. I think it's Ayo Edebiri, but they were all so good. Tina, I it's hard to pick a favorite
I know.
one because they all did their thing. They that's why we say, like, I wanted to say something earlier when you said uh it, it's no surprise how we're gonna rate a show because how we start talking about it at the beginning of the podcast.
Hmm.
And I think maybe we should
Yeah.
start with we should start the podcast that way. After we give the synopsis and the cast, we should say, hey, you got to stream this one, or you got to skip this one, or you got to wild wild west it,
Yep.
and this is why. You know what I mean?
That's a
Because
great. That's a great idea. We
incredible
can't help it.
acting.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, incredible acting will do that to you. You love every character, no matter how much screen time uh, they have, and that's what this does. Everyone, even if they only had a combined 5 minutes of screen time over the length of the series or the first season, they they
yep,
they hit their part. I mean, they were dead on.
yeah, dude. Like, the only reason why I don't say Carmi is because once I mention that, I'll want to talk more about the challenges, right? Like what
Yeah.
he, and then you feel like I give the show away too much, right? Like you alluded to, like the scene where he's the chef, the sous chef, which is, if I remember the
Hmm.
show, is like the second in charge, but he's getting destroyed, just belittled by Joel, whatever his name is,
Yeah, yeah.
in in that scene. And I was like, yo, I would murder this guy. Like, it's like, yeah, just tell him you don't belong here. What are you doing here? You know you're gonna be a fraud. You're a failure. Well, get out. You should
While
get out.
he's
I should
working.
fire you right. Like, eh, while he's working and trying to make these plates perfect because he's in
Hmm.
restaurants in the world, and he's like
Yep.
in all this stuff, and then he's like he goes it like I put that so far apart because what he delivered on that show was so far above that, like, I can't. He's the obvious choice for favorite character. He's the main character, right? Like,
Hmm.
I liked Marcus, right, because of the subtleness, and it shows the detail that and the care they put into developing the other characters. Because you'll see shows, and we come across them, right, where, well, that main character is amazing, and he
Hmm.
wraps everything up in a bow, but everybody around him is like, all right, I don't know anything about this person. Why should I be invested when they killed them off 8 seasons in? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
in 10 episodes, I know about Richie. I know about Sydney. I know about Marcus. I know about Fox. You know what I mean? Like, I know about Cicero. I know about Sugar. I know about Pete. Like, you explain all these characters in 10 episodes. Where, like, next season, hopefully, right, which it should, they explain it. But then my wife made a great point to go. It might not need a second season because it was such. It might be one of those that, like, that's kind of out there with, like, Lovecraft Country, which you haven't seen. Please watch, and we'll
Hmm.
talk about it eventually. You know what I mean? Like, there's ones that just need to be a one off. Like, it's this show was. I
I'm
don't
glad
want
they
to hype
picked
it
up a
like it's
second
perfect,
season.
right? Because everybody, yeah, I hope they better have the way it. That's not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. The way it concluded, but it it is just such a well done show. As, dude, look, for that monologue alone, like, for that monologue alone, the entire show is worth it. Like, to me, you know what I mean. Like, when Carmi's had enough, is and that scene is enough for me because, like, he's he's handling so much, and you know what I mean. Like, his brother, his brother's death, being one of the best chefs in the world, and having to come back to a sandwich shop, that has to
Yeah.
be a hit to his ego. You know what I mean? Like, nobody believing into who he is because, oh, what, you're one of the best chefs in the world. Nobody gives a shit. And hearing that from his cousin, that's supposed to be a guy who grew up with because it was his brother's
Yeah.
best friend. Like, there's so much pressure. It makes sense that eventually it was a powder keg, and then it just,
Of
oh,
course. It
bro,
always was.
yeah, it always was.
No.
Are
Well,
we
you
at the?
mentioned the
Are we at?
show
Yeah,
ending.
yeah.
You mentioned the show ending the way
Hmm.
it ended, where if it doesn't get picked up for a second season, and I don't know if it, I think it did. I have to check that out. But even if it didn't, the way it ended, that's where you have divergent kind of schools of thought where people there are people that want answers. And if that was it, if that was the entire show, like a limited series where they just give you 6 episodes of something and that's it, it's not going to be multiple seasons. Some people want an answer. Well, I didn't. What was the backstory to this? What happened with this? They just left it too open
Hmm.
ended. And then there are other people, you and I think, are in that school of thought. And I guess it depends on the show, but if they don't make another season, this was a great ending. I like that there's questions like that because then it keeps you talking about the
Yeah.
show like we're talking about it right now. And
Yeah.
and that's what happens with a lot of shows. And sometimes they bring them back years later and they'll do a follow up season or something like that. But yeah, they leave some things unexplained. They leave things to the imagination to where, okay, if there's a second season, you can kind of figure out what they might, how the story continues. And if they don't,
Yeah.
then it's up to you to figure out what happens with that ending. I liked it. I
Yeah.
like. I
Uh,
hope. And like I said, I read that they picked up a second season. I maybe I'm mistaken it for another show, but if they didn't, the ending doesn't give you all the answers, but they don't always have to. I love the way
it does.
that they left it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, yes, some shows. I think if they never touched back on things that happened earlier in that season, you'd be like,
Hmm.
okay, so they talked about this, but they never addressed this again, right? But
Right.
like they would allude to it and address it enough where they're like, oh look, we didn't forget that conversation happened. You know what I mean? It did happen, and let's give you some continuity with that. I appreciate that.
Hmm.
Like a show ends, but like if they gave you like a throwaway scene in episode 2 and then just never addressed that, I would have a problem. Like, hey man, so what? Especially when you binge it, like you're gonna
Yeah.
remember episode 2 when you're on episode 10, when each episode is 28 minutes long. You're gonna
Right.
remember that. Like, yo, you're not even gonna talk about what happened in this scene. Like, that's just gonna be completely brushed aside. Like, I need an explanation for that. Like, you don't just do
What's the
this whole
point?
big thing and then it doesn't. Yeah, what's the point? Like, that didn't happen in this show, right?
Hmm.
Like, a conversation that was had on episode 2 on a car is talked about again on episode whatever, you know what I mean, like an episode
Hmm.
this one. So like those little even things that like you think, oh, won't matter, like is a deeper explanation into each character. That like
Right.
Richie's character, you hate him but you understand why he's the way he is. Like having that understanding of that character doesn't mean you're not going to still hate him or now love him, right? Like that's up to the viewer, right? Like that's up to the person consuming it. Like, oh, but
Hmm.
that doesn't justify him being, you know what I mean? You could do that whole argument, but you'd be like,
You
oh,
appreciate
okay,
the
but
nuance
you
of the
also have to
character.
understand, like, exactly, like you still understand that, like, oh, look, at least the writer took the time to like give you as to why he's like this, right? Like you can
Hmm.
still make the decision why you hate this guy or like this guy or hate her or love, you know what I mean, her or love her, but it gives you the nuance, it gives you the ability to choose within yourself. So I really
Right.
appreciated that. I like a show that explains the characters without it making it like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, where they're like they
Hmm.
won't even say anything about Marcus, right? But like he's just working and that's enough. You know, he doesn't need
That's
to
all you
have a
see.
line.
Hmm.
That's all you see is like, oh, okay, like his wall is different. You know what I mean? Where he's in the corner of the room where he's working, and it's just a 2 second conversation with his roommate. You know what I'm saying? Like those little
Yep.
quick fire things matter. So let's if it's not obvious to everybody listening, and you're right, John, we're gonna start with the reason why you should stream it, skip it, or Wild Wild West it in future podcasts for sure. Because obviously it's a stream it, right? It's a stream it. It's a stream it
Absolutely. Yeah,
in every
you said
possible
that
way.
earlier. Let's go ahead and get to that part. We are at the part where we say stream it, skip it, or wild west it. And yes, if it wasn't obvious already, it's a stream it from me. Or like
Mm-hmm.
no, never mind. Yeah, it's a stream it from me.
Yeah, don't. It's a super streaming for me, man. Definitely check this
Yeah.
show out. Again, like what makes the show even better is that it's a sitcom, right? It's 28. It's super easy to binge, and you can fly right through it. So for sure, 100% stream The Bear on Hulu. All right, guys, that's all for us on Streamophile. Thank you. That's the bourbon right there. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you. That's my Tina there.
Very good
Thank you very
fandango.
much for very good fandango. Hey, you guys. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. It's episode 4. The Bear on Hulu is the stream it. Catch you guys next time. Peace.
Later.
Thanks for listening to Streamophile. Directed by John. Executive producer Ben and John. Created by Ben and John. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.